Hey everyone, before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to remind you that we have a ton of extra content over on our Patreon. We do movie watch parties, special Patreon bonus episodes, and all other sorts of wacky stuff that you can access easily if you head on over to patreon.com/filmwhiskey.
On today's Film and Whiskey, it's bracket time!
Bracket time!
We put all 32 movies from Season 6 into a Madness-style bracket and whittle them down to just one. At the same time, we're trying 3 ryes from our friends at Doc Swinson's Whiskey. That's all ahead on the Film and Whiskey Podcast! Hey everybody, welcome into the Film and Whiskey Podcast. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
Brad, it is the most wonderful time of the season. I'm so excited because it is bracket challenge o'clock right now.
Bracket time.
Man, okay, listen, if you're new to the podcast or if this is your first season that you've joined us, we structure our show thus. We have 32 movies in each season. And at the end of each season, we put those movies into a Madness-style bracket, and we crown one movie the champion of that season. So this is Season 6. We are here to determine what is the Season 6 champion. Brad, there's a little bit more to it than that, but that's basically the gist of what we're doing here.
That's it. We literally do nothing else but bracket preparation.
So I think we should give the people a little bit of like our methodology. Like let's lay the foundation here for what the bracket looks like. How can Brad
piss off Bob the most?
That is definitely your methodology, for sure. 100%. So what we do is, we give these movies a rating at the end of each week out of 10. And so at the end of each season, we have a nice little numerical list of how our movies came out. And so I rank those all by, what was a 10 out of 10, what was a 9.5, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, Brad and I, independent of each other, we just take the list of movies. Once we hit week 32, we look back over the list and we just kind of rearrange them by what our heart tells us is the best movie that year. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just, hey, it's been 32 weeks since we've seen some of these movies. It's been 1 week since we've seen some of these movies. How would we reorder these if we were doing it right now? And so at the end of that, we have 3 lists. We have our numerical list, and then we have our go with the heart list for each of us. We average all of those together, and we come out with one final list that, without fail, pisses both of us off. And that's how I know that it's a good methodology, because we take 1 through 32, we seed them out, we put them in a bracket, and every single season, dude, I look at this bracket, and I'm like, this is weird. This doesn't look right. And that's how I know that it's right. It's exactly right.
Yeah, I think that each season my heart just kind of, it's a free spirit, Bob. It wanders through the list willy-nilly and just kind of forgets certain movies that I might have been pumped about earlier in the year and elevates other movies that I might have given like a 7.5 or an 8 to, and yet somehow it's in my top 10. And that's just me and my gut feeling, Bob. I trust it. It's my knower. I know things.
I am trying to find words that don't sound accusatory of you, Brad G. But whenever we come out to our weird-looking, funky seating every season, it's mostly because of you. Like, let's just be real here. Because,
you are not the final authority on movies, Bob.
Oh, I'm not. But what I'm saying is, my scores stay pretty consistent from like the time we watch the movie to the end of the season. I'm like, oh yeah, this is still a 10 out of 10. Therefore, in my mind, I'm probably going to rank this in my top 2 or 3 of the season. And so like, generally there's a little bit of shuffling in my list, but it's pretty consistent. And then I get your list back and, without spoiling which movie it is, Brad, there's a movie this season that you gave a 10 out of 10 to. And then I think you ranked it like number 13 out of 32 on your list.
I sure did.
And I don't get it, man. I don't understand the depths of your heart.
I think for me, it's more about what movies would I want to watch again. And I don't know if that's an accurate depiction of like, the best movie at 1 and the worst at 32. But I would say that just because I gave a movie a 10 out of 10 doesn't mean I'm like aching to rewatch it. Whereas there's certain movies that I would rewatch over and over again that might rank a few spots higher. So
you know what's really funny is I feel like the way we approach this is almost completely flipped from each other, because when I'm ranking my movies, I'm mostly just like, what's the better movie? Like whether or not it's a rewatch or not, like what's the better film here? But when it comes time for us to actually do the bracket and there's a head-to-head matchup, and our criteria in a head-to-head matchup is one of these movies is going to get thrown into the fiery furnace and never seen or heard from again, and only one can survive forever. That's when I'm usually like, all right, which one would I rather watch again? Like, if I had to just stumble upon this on the cable on a weekend afternoon, like, what's the movie that I'm going to stop and actually watch? And so it's funny because I feel like you do that during the listing and not so much during the head-to-head, and I do it during the head-to-head and not during the listing.
I think what I'm hearing is you're just trying to draw this out so that you don't have to throw away any of your movies.
That's true. All right, man, let's reveal the bracket here. I will say before we get started that we are trying 3 whiskeys today from our friends at Doc Swinson's. They've been our sponsor throughout season 6. They've been an incredible sponsor for us. They sent us 7 different spirits to try, one of which was a rum that they finished in a whole bunch of different kinds of casks. And that one Brad and I are just keeping for ourselves. We don't really drink rum on Film and Whiskey, surprise, surprise. But what we have left over after the rum is 3 ryes and 3 bourbons. And so on this edition of the bracket episode, we're going to drink the 3 ryes. Next time around, we'll drink the 3 bourbons. So we'll break at certain points, Brad. We'll try these ryes. But it's time for us to dive into this, man. And I'm looking at our bracket right now. Once again, it is incredibly frustrating. For me, at least. So if you're following along, we are going to start up in the upper left-hand quadrant with our number 1 overall seed. Brad, reveal our seed. Oh, that sounds gross.
Whoa, hey, Bob,
Brad, reveal our number 1 seed to the listeners.
I was going to say, we should name each quadrant.
I was thinking about this.
The cruise quadrant, the Hanks quadrant. Of course there's a
cruise quadrant.
Obviously. In the cruise quadrant, our number 1 film of the season is Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park.
I'm not surprised at all. Like, not even a little bit. Are you?
No. I think I had it as my number 2 overall. It's freaking Jurassic Park, man. Yep. There's dinosaurs, there's horror, there's family dynamics. It's just so good.
And it's going up against our number 32 overall seed, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Scott Pilgrim versus the T-Rex.
It is a losing battle, my friend. I think it's pretty obvious that Jurassic Park's moving on here, but...
Say one nice thing about Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
That's what I was going to do. You know, it's the number 32 seed, and it's not my cup of tea, but even I'm a little bit surprised that it shook out to be the 32 seed. And I think that says a lot about the quality of films this season. We really didn't I think we only gave a couple movies anywhere below like a 7.5 this season. And this one shook out to about a 7, I think. I gave it a 5.5 and you gave it like an 8 maybe. So it was low-ish, but even that is our worst movie of the season. I think that says quite a bit about what we're going to be looking at in the bracket.
But say one nice thing about the movie itself, Bob.
I like Michael Cera, and I like Edgar Wright.
Okay.
Not in this movie, but yeah. Jurassic Park moves on.
Jurassic Park, yeah.
All right, and we're jumping immediately from the widest gap between matchups to the narrowest one, because the next matchup is the 16 seed Raging Bull up against the 17 seed The Searchers. Now, again, these are 2 movies that we rated quite highly. I gave Raging Bull a 9. I think, Brad, you gave it either a 7.5 or an 8. The Searchers, I also gave a 9 to. And I don't remember exactly what score you gave it, Brad, but it really ended up...
I think it was around a 9.
Yeah, it ended up coming out to how we seeded them out in our individual lists. And as I recall, Raging Bull was pretty low for you. And so that's how it ends up here at 16. And I'm kind of shocked to see both these movies here. And this was a really hard matchup for me, Brad.
Yeah, I think that if I just had to go on overall enjoyability, I'd have to go with The Searchers. But the idea of throwing out that final scene of Raging Bull to be lost to the fiery inferno is like really hard, because I think that might be like a top 20 all-time scenes in film history.
I'm going to be honest here, because I'm the guy that liked Raging Bull more. I picked The Searchers, and I think because it's ultimately... Ooh. I think The Searchers is a more influential movie in Hollywood. It inspired Spielberg and Scorsese and George Lucas and all of these directors that we know and love now. And I think taken as a whole, I think it's a more consistently good movie, whereas Raging Bull had higher highs, but they didn't come until the very end of the movie. So because of that, I'm actually moving The Searchers on.
Yeah, I actually chose The Searchers as well.
Wow, okay.
I legitimately almost chose Raging Bull just because the scene of De Niro trying to talk to Pesci at the end of the film is soul crushing.
Yeah.
In such a beautiful way. But yeah, I couldn't quite do it, man.
All right, so The Searchers is moving on, and that takes us to the number 9 seed, Baby Driver, up against the number 24 seed, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Close Encounters was, I think, pretty easily ranked for us, Brad, as the worst of the 4 that we watched from Spielberg. I think I actually ranked it as his third worst, but I understood exactly where you were coming from. It's a movie that, like, there's some tonal whiplash going on in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a couple storytelling leaps that I wish that he had drawn out a little bit more. For the most part, I think it's a brilliantly constructed film. It's a really, really well-written script. And I hate to be the guy that's like, I'm going to put Baby Driver on over this classic movie by Spielberg. But I honestly think that if I'm just taking it at face value, I like Baby Driver better than I like Close Encounters. And I'm going to move Baby Driver on.
Yeah, I'm going to move Baby Driver on as well. I think that Close Encounters really is a great movie. But it's almost worth it more for the interview that is done with Spielberg, where Spielberg realizes that he was trying to pair his parents back together.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one who showed me this, Bob. And I like that interview makes the entire movie worth it, because you get to see into Spielberg's soul for a second, and it's incredible.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that we're moving Baby Driver on. Like I said, I ranked Close Encounters 18th out of the 32 films for the season. Not a bad movie by any stretch, but Baby Driver, I think, is one of the better action movies of the last 10, 15 years. And so, yeah, it moves on. It's crazy how brackets work, man, because we just had Raging Bull and The Searchers, 2 of the most highly regarded movies ever. And now you got like Baby Driver sneaking into, the round of 16.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it works. You get a 7, 8, 9 seed that can do some damage in the tournament. You just never know what's going to happen.
All right, man, why don't you give us our next matchup?
Yeah, this one we are going with 2 action classics, Shaun of the Dead and The Terminator.
If you had told me before we started this bracket episode that Edgar Wright would have 2 pretty easy victories in the first round, I'd be really surprised. And that's saying nothing about Edgar Wright. He's a great director. And The Terminator is kind of a watershed moment in sci-fi and action cinema, but especially the fact that we have T2 floating around somewhere on this bracket, and that movie is just so superior to the first Terminator movie.
Yeah.
I don't really feel bad getting rid of it in favor of Shaun of the Dead here, and so that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think Shaun of the Dead is one of my absolute favorite comedies of all time. So that's an easy pickup. The Terminator is fun and it's engaging, and I really think Arnold does a great job being a robot. But it's nothing compared to what Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg do in Shaun of the Dead.
All right, so there are our first 4 entries into the round of 16. Jurassic Park, The Searchers, Baby Driver, Shaun of the Dead. We're moving down into our lower left quadrant here. What's this one called, Brad?
This one is the Hanks quadrant.
Oh, okay. I was thinking you were just gonna pick variations of Tom Cruise's name and just call it like the Tom bracket. But that applies to the Hanks bracket too.
Yeah, we should call it the Mission Impossible bracket, the Jack Reacher bracket, the Edge of Tomorrow bracket.
The Maverick bracket, yeah.
The Maverick. The Top Gun bracket.
All right, well, leading off the Top Gun bracket is the 2 least action-packed movies ever made, and it is the number 4 overall seed, Brief Encounter, up against the number 29 overall seed, The Quiet Man.
The Quiet Man is action-packed, dude. It has like a 15-minute fight scene, okay?
It has action. I don't know if it's packed with action. There's like some action dangling off the end a little bit, like a hangnail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Action hangnail.
If there is one movie this season that I am shocked by its placement, it is Brief Encounter. I thought that I was going to have to defend that movie tooth and nail, that it would be our most boring episode of the season because you would be checked out and calling it dumb. And I am so pleasantly surprised, A, that you liked that movie, but B, that we both liked this movie enough that it is the number 4 seed.
Bob, Brief Encounter, fun fact, incredible movie.
That is a fun fact.
It is such a good film. I think that it is quiet and it is intense. And the most important thing I think I can say about it is that it is incredibly sincere and believable.
Mm-hmm. And then there's The Quiet Man, which is a movie that I really like, but that I don't do anything more than like. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's very sincere.
Yes.
It is not very believable.
All right, so The Quiet Man was your movie, dude. Like, we put this movie on the list because you were like, we got to do it at some point. It is a gorgeous film to look at. And it features one of my favorite John Wayne performances. Like, there's a lot of good things to say about it. And so I'm going to put the ball in your court here, man. Which one did you move on?
I put Brief Encounter forward.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel so proud.
I love The Quiet Man. It's really a fun movie, but it's not compared to Brief Encounter. Brief Encounter is a movie's movie, Bob.
You know, I will say we're recording this episode a few weeks in advance. Spoiler alert. It's Valentine's Day. And what so a
let's
nice
watch a movie about infidelity.
But I mean, like, it is one of the classic romance movies. It's a tragic movie, but like, you got that, and then you've got The Quiet Man, which is like the uplifting romance movie. This would be a nice little Valentine's pairing. I like it.
I don't think so. I don't think my wife wants to watch a movie about infidelity with me on Valentine's Day.
Well, all right. Your wife needs to expand her horizons, man. That's what I'm saying here.
Just like, what's her face expanded her horizons in Brief Encounter?
Yeah, you know? All right, we're moving on, dude. We're going to go to the number 13 overall seed, Raiders of the Lost Ark, up against the number 20 overall seed, Lawrence of Arabia. Now, again, I feel like we have to put disclaimers on these things, because, like, when I say Raiders is the number 13 seed and Lawrence of Arabia is the 20th, like, it sounds like, A, we don't know what we're talking about, and B, that we didn't enjoy those movies. And that is not the case. Like, I gave both of those movies a 9 out of 10. They're great movies. They just didn't crack that top tier for me. And honestly, having the director format, Brad, I think that I enjoyed both of David Lean's other 2 movies more than I enjoyed Lawrence of Arabia, as important as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I definitely enjoyed Raiders a lot more. I definitely enjoyed Bridge and Brief Encounter more. Mm-hmm. So for me, Raiders is going on carefully. I like Lawrence of Arabia. I think it's incredibly important in cinematic history. But I like Raiders more.
I probably also like Raiders more, but I did move Lawrence of Arabia on. And yeah, and like, I don't feel great about it, but at the end of the day, Raiders is another one of those movies that it's a great movie. It's a great Spielberg movie, but like Jaws, I feel that it might be just a tad overestimated. Like, I'm going to compare it to Jurassic Park. I think Jurassic Park does everything Raiders does better than Raiders. The same way I think it does everything that Jaws does better than Jaws. I don't even think Raiders is my favorite of the indie movies. I think Last Crusade is probably my favorite one. So
yeah,
as much as it pains me to throw Raiders of the Lost Ark up on the altar, I'm going to put Lawrence of Arabia into the next round. And that means...
You know what that means, Bob?
What does it mean?
Means that we're about to flip the coin of destiny.
The coin of destiny, which is always held by Brad in the most suspicious of circumstances. Brad?
I have never once lied, Robert.
All right, we're going to say that Raiders of the Lost Ark is heads. Lawrence of Arabia is tails. When we come to an impasse, we flip a coin to see what moves on to the next round. Brad, flip that coin.
Bob?
Yes?
Lawrence of Arabia, the film you chose, is going deep into the next round of this bracket.
Wow. You've gotten so good at teasing this, man. Like, you've been taking notes on Ryan Seacrest on American Idol.
It feels
I
like
thought that was going
scene.
A different way with every single word you said.
Yeah, it feels like a Family Guy scene where they just draw it out, or like My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah. All right, so Lawrence of Arabia moves on. That means my bracket is still unblemished, Brad. Yours has taken a hit at this point. That takes us to our next matchup, the number 12 seed Heat up against the number 21 seed Moonrise Kingdom. Now, Brad, I will speak for the both of us here.
Uh-huh.
Moonrise Kingdom ended up being a weirdly divisive movie that I did not see that coming.
Easily the most divisive movie in film and whiskey
in the
history
of the Film and Whiskey podcast. And it didn't become divisive until the last 5 minutes of the episode. It was such a pleasant and enjoyable time. And then out of nowhere, the division struck.
Yeah. I was very proud of myself for waiting till the end. I had the wool pulled over your eyes pretty hard.
I was so blindsided. Now, I will say this, okay? Brad has some personal moral objections to that movie. Because of that, he actually said, I don't think I'm going to score this movie because I think I would give this movie a very low score just because I disagree with it ethically. And so he withheld his vote. What's the word when you he abstained from voting on that movie. So our seeding really only reflected my first score and then our placement of the movie on both lists. So
where did you put it on your list?
Let me take a look. I put it at number 16. So right in the middle.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It definitely fell in my estimation this time around. I used to love that movie more than Grand Budapest. And then this time around, I was like, what the hell was I thinking? I'm okay just saying, let's get rid of Moonrise Kingdom because I like Heat. It's about on the same level as Heat in terms of which one would I rather watch on a Saturday afternoon kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. But it's not worth carrying into the next round if it's going to be a weird thing that's going to always stoke division. Let's just throw it to the wolves and then move Heat on.
Throw it into the fiery inferno and keep Heat out of it.
Yeah. Counterintuitively.
Yeah, who would have thought? Yeah, Heat is moving on.
Part of the reason that it was so easy to move Heat on is because I have a feeling that whatever comes out of that matchup, now we know that it's Heat, is going to have a really hard time in the next matchup because we've got the number 5 overall seed, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, going up against the number 28 overall seed, The Grapes of Wrath. I don't know that we need to talk about this very long, Brad.
Yeah. Grapes of Wrath is okay. Terminator 2 is incredible.
The end. I mean, T2 moves on here.
Yeah, for real. I want to drink rye whiskey, Robert.
I do too. So real quick, let's recap the 4 movies that moved on. Brief Encounter, Lawrence of Arabia, Heat, and Terminator 2. And now, Brad, it is time to drink some whiskey. Can you direct us to which of these 3 experimental casks we are going to be trying first?
I think we should try their Funky Drummer.
The Funky Drummer is an exploratory cask from Doc Swinson's. It's a straight rye whiskey, which has been finished in Jamaican rum casks. Brad, I am pouring it out right now. So you regale us with the story of your experience with this bad boy.
Yeah, well, I will start by saying Doc Swinson's is incredible.
Stand up, guys.
They are such cool guys making truly incredible whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
their exploratory casks, guys, you have to go get them. Like, if you are seeing anything in a white label from Doc Swinson's, it means that it's a once in a lifetime, like, try it now or forever hold your peace kind of whiskey. And having them send us these 7 versions of it, 6 whiskeys and a rum, I have tried them. Holy shit. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. Go buy it. Secondly, let's talk about the Funky Drummer.
The Funky Drummer.
The funkiest of drummers. Now, this one is a rye whiskey finished in a Jamaican rum cask. I think Bob might have already said that. It's coming in at 105.3 proof.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, I think this is like one of the most classic, nice ryes I've ever had. And I will say this one, it doesn't rise to the levels that we're going to hit with our other 2 ryes that they sent us. But for me, on the nose, the palate, and the finish, it just had one of the most pleasant baking spice, rye, oaky, vanilla taste to it that I've ever had.
Yeah. So this is a blended whiskey or a blended rye. It's a blend of 2 5-year ryes, both from MGP. The first one is a 95 rye, 5 malted barley mash bill. The second one is a 51% rye, 45% corn, 4% barley mash bill. So, it's kind of like right in the middle. This is probably sitting somewhere about 75% rye. And I really like that. I think it is rounded quite nicely by some of those corn notes. Brad, I think you're right in that, I'm especially comparing this to one that we're probably going to drink next, which is similarly finished, but that I thought had a lot more character than this. This is like, hey, here's a classic rye flavor with a little bit of tropical notes thrown in on top of it. And it's at, I don't want to say cask strength, but it's 105 proof. Like it's a little bit of a kick in the head. I really like this, man. I think it is it's a really good baseline to start from in our 3 ryes today.
Yeah, I think so. This, and I'll say this, if we scored this out, I would probably come out to like a 37, 38 out of 50.
Yeah.
And if that's setting the baseline, the standard for where we're going, I am very excited.
I definitely get a lot of banana on this. It reminds me a lot of some of the ryes we've had from Barrel. Like, it just kind of reminds me of that flavor profile. Really nice, kind of classic, spicy, but it doesn't tip into that like dill or mint. It stays on the sweeter side. This is a rye for bourbon drinkers, and that's why I like it so much. I'm right there with you, man. It would be somewhere between like 37 and 40 for me. Definitely on the higher end of the upper proof rye spectrum that we've had. And I think it's a great place for us to start here as we segue back into our bracket. What do you say, man?
Yeah, let's get to it.
Hey there, you popinjays, it's me, George B. Stagger, your trusted voice in the world of selective spirits. Today's 60-second whiskey appraisal is brought to you by Doc Swinson's. Doc Swinson's, the perfect whiskey for adventurous whiskey explorers. Today we're reviewing their Tres Amigos, one of their exploratory cask series. This is a straight rye whiskey finished in rum and tequila barrels. On the nose, it's all orange to me, friends. Citrus fruit and agave with just a hint of pear. The palate is a mean mix of toasted sugar, peppercorn, and citrus, and the finish is just bursting full of pineapple, vanilla, and oak. By golly, this whiskey is bonkers delicious. If you are in the market for a grand old time, then you must go partake in the delicious offerings prepared by the legendary blenders over at Doc Swinson's. Remember, this 60-second review has been brought to you by Doc Swinson's. Find the closest retailer to you at docswhiskey.com. That's DOCS whiskey.com. Until next time, folks, this is George B. Stagger signing off.
All right, we are moving our way to the top right bracket, also known as the Let's Make It Tom Cruise Rain bracket.
Love it.
And our first matchup in this bracket is the grandiest, the most Budapestian hotel versus the number 31 seed, the Big Lebowski. That is the number 2 seed, Grand Budapest Hotel.
Brad, I don't really think I need to say too much about this. Am I surprised that Lebowski is 31? Kind of. But even though I like that movie better than I used to, I still just don't see it as more than like a 7.5. And I will freely admit that I don't get that movie. I don't get what is there that so many people love about it. I'm glad people like that movie. It's fine. It is a good movie. It is no Grand Budapest Hotel, which we should say was Brad G's number 1 ranked movie of this year when you turned your list in. Over Jurassic Park.
Over Jurassic Park. I freaking loved that movie, dude.
Yeah, I don't think I realized you liked it that much.
Well, I mean, it helped that we had Patrick Willems on to talk about it. I think that he has just such an incredible way of elucidating what makes a movie great and fun and enjoyable. So I really enjoyed hearing him talk about it. But on top of that, I just had a freaking blast watching that movie. It is wild. It is zany. It goes places you would never expect it to go. And I love Ralph Fiennes. I think over the last few years of watching this podcast, we've only had Ralph Fiennes on 2 or 3 times. I think 3 between The Prince of Egypt, Schindler's List, and now Grand Budapest.
Yeah. And then all the Harry Potters.
And the Harry Potters. So actually, we've had a pretty good dosage of him. I love Ralph Fiennes.
I do too. So Grand Budapest Hotel is moving on. And that takes us to what I think is probably a much more intriguing matchup here, Brad, because I have a feeling we might be split on this one. It is the number 15 seed, Silence, up against the number 18 seed, The Princess Bride. Now, The Princess Bride is a movie that I have a bone to pick with you about because, we both kind of said, hey, it's a fine movie. It's pretty good. It's more clever than it is laugh out loud funny. I gave it a 7.5. I believe you gave it either an 8 or an 8.5. And then you turned your list back in and it was like way higher up the list than I would have expected it to be. And I said, what the hell? And you said, I love that movie. So it seems to have risen in your estimation here.
I love the Princess Bride, Bob. I put it at number 9 out of 32. So not like crazy high, but, top 10.
Yeah.
I think that what sticks out for me with the Princess Bride is how it is such a farcical film where everyone takes the film so seriously. And for me, I think it's the peak of like 80s farcical movies. I like Spaceballs. That's pretty fun. There's other films like that in the Mel Brooks type of vein of comedy. Blazing Saddles is incredible from the 70s. But for me, Princess Bride just kind of takes the cake. And like I said, I didn't watch it till I was older. So it's not like I have some nostalgia here. I really enjoy that movie.
I'm going to be honest, man. I moved Silence on here. And it's not because I think Silence is like some masterpiece. Because once again, on the rewatch, I was like, yeah, this is a good movie, but it's definitely really long. And I could see how this would not be compelling to someone who isn't Christian. Not my favorite Scorsese movie. Definitely the worst of the 3 that we looked at from him. And so this was one of those toss-ups where I'm like, I think whatever goes here is going to get beat by Grand Budapest in the next round. And I don't really care when I move on. So I put Silence there just to spice things up a little.
Yeah, I mean, I like Silence, but you're right in saying it was not the best of the 3. And I'll also say, I'm glad that they came up against each other, because I think they might be the most tonally different movies, far and away the most different films we've had this season.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll flip the coin because I'm moving the Princess Bride ahead.
All right, so that means Silence is going to be heads, Princess Bride is going to be tails for a spot in the round of 16. Brad, flip that coin.
Robert?
Bradley?
Your streak thus far of winning the only coin toss will survive.
Ooh. Silence
is moving on into the next round.
Okay. I don't really feel like a moral victory about that. It's more like, lambs to the slaughter here against Wes Anderson.
Silence of the Lambs to the slaughter. Nailed it.
All right, here's one that I'm excited for, and I really hope that it doesn't become divisive. It is the number 10 overall seed, A Few Good Men, up against the number 23 seed, Collateral. Talk about a dude movie matchup.
This would honestly be a great double feature.
I would watch the hell out of both of these movies back to back.
Yep.
A Few Good Men ended up in I want to say it was like in my top 5 of the season, and I would not have anticipated that. Let's see. Oh no, I had it at number 9. So, I mean, still way high up there. This is a movie that the Rob Reiner of it all, I think, are the things that we didn't like about it. Like, it's kind of flat looking. It's not visually that interesting, but it also might have my favorite Aaron Sorkin script. And it's got a great Tom Cruise performance, and it's got a great Jack Nicholson performance, and the last 40-ish minutes of this movie are just picture perfect. And if I happened to catch any of that last 40 minutes on television, I'm not turning it off. Whereas I think I could pry myself away from Collateral at pretty much any point. So it's Cruise versus Cruise, man. Where did you come out on this one?
You had to do it to me. You know, the more I reflect on Collateral, the more I think that Tom Cruise, his performance of a hired, assassin, hitman, it's one of my favorite villain performances of all time. Like I want to go back and watch it again, but I think he just has an incredible ability to simultaneously make you like him as a character, and it masks how desperately evil and heartless he is. And there's so many moments, like when he's talking to Jamie Foxx's boss on the radio, and he's like empowering Jamie Foxx, and he's teaching him how to be a man that stands up for himself. And it's moments like that where you're like, man, I really like this guy. And yet at the end of the day, he is pure evil personified. Like he is just as heartless as Anton Chigurh,
Yep.
And I actually think that he's up there as one of my favorite villains. But A Few Good Men is the better movie.
All right. Yep. A Few Good Men moves on into what is quite possibly the second dutiest matchup in our bracket this time around. The number 7 overall seed, Bridge on the River Kwai, up against the number 26 seed, Avatar. A movie that Brad just continues to not give any credit to. I'm not arguing that it's a great movie, but I think it's better.
Ahead of 4 other movies.
I think it's better than you give it credit for. I did go back to see The Way of Water in IMAX 3D. Like, I drove to Cleveland to see it, not just in 3D, but in IMAX. It was far and away the best 3D experience I have ever had in my life. And there were things about the 2D version of that movie that I was like, oh, the special effects in this are great. Like, the CGI is incredible, but there were a few elements in it that looked kind of chintzy. And then in 3D, it was like, oh, this looks photorealistic. Like, it looks so much different than it did in 2D. That has nothing to do with this Avatar, but we're never going to talk about it again. So I figured I might as well get it out there. Bridge on the River Kwai is 55 times the movie that Avatar is.
Yeah. Yeah, Bridge on the River Kwai is truly just an incredible film. It's one that I, watched when I was like 10 to 12 years old, didn't watch it for 2 decades, and here I am just blown away by what Lean did. I'm moving Bridge on the River Kwai on. Okay,
so that quadrant is wrapped up. We're moving on the Grand Budapest Hotel, Silence, A Few Good Men, and Bridge on the River Kwai. And that takes us to the lower right quadrant, which, what are we calling this one, man?
The Ethan Hunt bracket.
The Hunt region. Starting with the number 3 seed, Taxi Driver, up against the number 30? The number 30 seed, Last of the Mohicans. To Daniel Joyo, our good friend. I know you love this movie, man. It's a pretty good movie. It is no Taxi Driver.
No, Taxi Driver, like, everything I liked about, something like Heat is just amplified tenfold in Taxi Driver. So, yeah, Taxi Driver moves on.
A deeply unsettling movie.
Oh, dude. Yeah, that one doesn't sit well with you by the end.
Highest recommendation from Film and Whiskey.
Go watch it. You'll feel terrible.
And that takes us to the 14 seed, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, up against the 19 seed, Misery. Once again, tonally wild matchup here. And I think potentially divisive again, Brad, because both of these movies... Oh, go ahead.
Here's what I want to see. I just want to see the sirens lure and seduce Clooney and his friends. And then he wakes up in the bed with Kathy Bates getting ready to break his ankles. That's the mashup I want to see from this season.
I think that both of these movies are not entirely fulfilling to me. And I like them both. And it just kind of comes down to which one do I think is the more successful at what it ultimately sets out to do. And I think that Misery is just slightly more successful at that. I actually might get more enjoyment out of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But it's really, really narrow. And so for that reason, I moved Misery on.
Yeah, I honestly, these were two of the most enjoyable films of the year for me. I just think they're both so incredibly successful at what they want to do. For me, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou moves on. I think it's just such an incredibly witty comedy, and Clooney just turns in an incredible performance. Mm-hmm. So I'm ready to flip the coin, man.
All right, that means that Oh Brother, Where Art Thou will be heads, Misery will be tails. Brad, flip that coin.
Bob, we're sticking with the heads, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou will be moving on.
All right, I have taken my first L in the bracket this season. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou will be going up against Taxi Driver. Once again, wildly different movies in the round of 16. Can I just
tell you why Raising Arizona is a terrible movie?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of our next matchup, the number 11 seed Aliens going up against the number 22 seed Raising Arizona. Before you tell me why it's terrible, I have to say, man, this was an incredibly hard matchup for me. And I want you to imagine liking Oh Brother, Where Art Thou 15% more than you do. And that's like how I feel about Raising Arizona. And then you've got Aliens, which is a nearly perfect action sci-fi movie that I am shocked to see all the way down at 11. And I think, Brad, it's because you didn't have it as high up your list as I expected it to be.
Yeah, I had it ranked number 19, so just a little below the halfway point.
Now, this is not, again, I'm not trying to be accusatory here. What is it about the movie that made it drop that far when it came time to rank them all out?
Honestly, I think it's the fact that it didn't stick with me a ton. Like the things I kind of remember from it in its favor are the relationship between the little girl and Sigourney Weaver. And I think that the horror scene with the face sucker that's let in there by what's his face, the bad guy,
Paul Reiser.
Paul Reiser, thank you. I think that scene is incredible, but there's just too many scenes of really bad 80s practical effects / CG that just don't look good. And the final fight scene is just bulky and awkward. And so it's a great action movie. I really enjoyed it, but it also was hard because we also had T2 in this bracket. And I think that kind of, influenced my opinion on this movie.
All right. Well, I'm going to be real with you, dude. My first pass at this bracket, I put Raising Arizona ahead of Aliens. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, you know what? I like them almost equally. It is not worth the effort of having Brad be mad at me about this. I'm going to put Aliens ahead. I will take the high road.
I love when you submit to my will.
All right, Aliens is moving on, and it's going to be going up against...
Bob officially thinks that Raising Arizona is a bad movie, everybody. Just so we all know.
Raising Arizona is no more. Aliens is going up against our number 6 seed, a little movie called Jaws, which is facing off against the number 27 seed, Rushmore. Rushmore is a movie that there's a certain subset of people that think it's perfect. I do not. In fact, I think it is pretty accurately placed here at number 27 on our list. So
I was going to say, where did you put it on your list? Because I put it at 17. For me, it was the epitome of a forgettable middle of the road movie.
It was number 30 for me.
Really? Wow.
And again, it's a 7.5 for me. But that was good enough to be number 30 this season,
Wow. Yeah, okay.
Get the hell out of here, Rushmore. It's Jaws' turn.
Dun, dun.
Is that the final word on Jaws?
That's it, man.
Okay. So the 4 movies that have moved on are Taxi Driver, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Aliens, and Jaws. If I may say so, 4 absolute bangers.
Bro.
Great region down here.
Just incredible movies.
And now it is time for us to drink a second whiskey. We are looking at Doc Swinson's Tres Amigos. This is, again, an exploratory cask. It's a straight rye whiskey that has been finished in both rum and tequila casks. It's clocking in at 101.9 proof. And Brad, I might be in love.
Yeah. I was going to say, I have always said that if there was another liquor I would, desire to get into, if companies wanted to send me free product, it would be tequila.
Mm-hmm.
I love tequila, man. I think that, it's such a vastly different experience than whiskey that I'm really intrigued by it. But also, the flavors you get on tequila are incredible. So I love seeing them paired up here.
I think on the nose, the tequila actually really shines through on this, and like in somewhat a good way and in somewhat a way that I feel like it swallows up the rye just a bit. But it's also because we're not used to having things finished in tequila. Like, this is just new to us. And so I definitely noticed it on the nose. But when you get into the taste, really sweet, like sugary sweet. It reminds me of like, those like kind of gummy candies that are like rolled in sugar, like the like orange slices that are like,
oh yeah,
what I mean? It kind of reminds me of that kind of candy, but then it has a really nice floral note to it as well, and then the rye spice comes right in at the end. It was really beautiful, man.
Yeah, I think that you get some of that agave taste coming through on the nose, but really for me, that note of like a candied orange stuck out. It was very citrusy and very sweet. I think when I got into the actual palate, the citrus continued to come through. There was almost like a toasted sugar, like a burnt sugar feel to it. There's some peppercorn. This is incredible, Bob.
I'm going to ask you this now, Brad. We're going to throw call an audible here. Do you want to just do the third whiskey right now? Do you want to move right into it?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Let's freaking do it. I'm going to say this. I tried the Tres Amigos before we started recording tonight. I tried the Funky Drummer on air. I have not even cracked the seal on our third one, which is called Smoke on the Water. This is a straight rye that's been finished in peated Scotch quarter casks, clocking it at 103.8 proof. Brad, this sounds like the platonic ideal of a whiskey for you.
Dude, let me tell you this. If we were scoring out this bottle, I think it might come close to being barrel seagrass for me.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it is right there as far as an incredible rye that is matched with everything beautiful that comes out of a peated Scotch. This whiskey, at the very bare bones minimum, is like a 48, 49 out of 50 for me.
All right, now I will temper your praise just a bit to say that the nose on this is more muted than I expected it to be. Like, it's not quite as smoky as I expected, and it's also not quite as rye forward as I expected. Did you have the same experience, Brad, or did it open up more for you?
Nope, you're dumb, Bob. This has just enough smoke. It's got all sorts of like toasted almonds, some marshmallow. The rye comes through a little bit softer, but enough to let you know that it's there. And then I got some interesting notes of grape throughout that I was like just blown away by. This just screamed complexity to me, and I am a huge fan.
On the palate, for me, some of those notes that come up time and time again with certain ryes, that like really woody, like almost backyard pulling weeds, vegetal, herbal thing comes out in this rye. This definitely tips more into the herbal side of rye whiskey, whereas the other two were more sweet for me. And I think that is the influence of the peated scotch, but this doesn't have a ton of peaty scotch flavor to me. It tastes more like some of those younger craft ryes that have that I don't know, what do you want to call it? That herbaceousness to them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can kind of see where you're going with that. I actually got a little bit of citrus here, almost like a fresh squeezed orange juice. The rye spice comes through really strong on the palate. There is just a hint of peat on the palate that really opens up on the finish and hits you with a little more smoke. But on the actual tasting, there's some sherry that's coming through that is reminiscent of the grape I was getting on the nose. And for me, it stayed just sweet enough. There's a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of caramel that I love this palate, Bob.
Brad, if I was going to rank these out, I think I would go with the rum and tequila finished as my favorite. I would go with the rum finished as my second one. And then I'd probably put this one third. But they're so varied and so complex, each of them, that to say that I have a personal preference is not a dig at any of these three.
I think that what Doc Swinson's is doing with her exploratory casks, I am just wildly jealous of anybody who can get Docs regularly in their area. Mm-hmm. So please, 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 Doc Swinson's makes phenomenal whiskey. You guys know how much I love barrel products. Barrel Seagrass is my only whiskey I've ever given a 50 out of 50 on. I think that Doc Swinson's is it's like 1A and 1B for me. I think Barrel is my favorite company still, but Doc Swinson's is just there. And everybody else is leagues behind.
All right, man. Let's get back into this bracket. Let's whittle this down to a round of 8. What do you say?
Yeah, let's fly through this, man. I'm ready.
Hey everybody, Bob here, and I just want to tell you really quickly about Anchor.fm. We are using Anchor to host our podcast. That's where we basically build out the podcast. It's where we schedule episodes. If you have been looking into getting into podcasting, I cannot recommend Anchor.fm highly enough. We were using another one in the past that actually cost us money each month. Anchor.fm is free. You can actually build your whole podcast inside of Anchor. You can record directly to the website. You can have people record and leave messages for you there. You can even set up a wallet to start accepting donations from your listeners. Anchor.fm has everything you need to start your own podcast. So the real question is, what are you waiting for? Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started today.
All right, so our first matchup in the round of 16 is Jurassic Park, the number 1 seed, against the Searchers, the 17 seed. I think this is where we say adieu to the Searchers, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to sing it, but Jurassic Park is an easy vote to move on.
It's going to be really hard to beat Jurassic Park. I'm just being frank here, people.
Yeah, Jurassic Park is maybe a top 3 movie for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So
it's up there.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, it moves on in this round because I'm moving it forward as well.
All right, and then we've got an Edgar Wright head-to-head matchup, Baby Driver against Shaun of the Dead. This is a really hard matchup, Brad, because I think I like Baby Driver better. I think Baby Driver is certainly the more polished film.
Yeah.
I think Shaun of the Dead is going to be more Edgar Wright's legacy film, though. And so it kind of just depends, which one is your preference. I think, quite frankly, Baby Driver works for me just a little bit more than Shaun of the Dead, and I put Baby Driver on.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we have Edgar Wright here matching up against himself. I actually moved Shaun of the Dead on.
I'm kind of glad this is coming down to a coin flip, honestly.
Yeah, I am too, because I think that watching Edgar Wright is some of the most fun I had this entire season. Mm-hmm. And Baby Driver fits that. Shaun of the Dead fits that. So it's an easy coin flip here.
Which one do you want to be heads? Because Shaun of the Dead is actually the higher seeded film.
I usually just go with the higher geographic is going to be heads. So Baby Driver would be heads. Shaun of the Dead would be tails.
All right, let's flip that coin.
Bob, Mr. Shaun of the Dead is moving on to the next round.
All right, Shaun of the Dead is moving on. Baby Driver has driven itself off of a cliff, and that takes us to Brief Encounter versus Lawrence of Arabia, Lean versus Lean. I really think Brief Encounter is like the little movie that could this season, man. This is the Butler, this is the VCU of this bracket, and I put Brief Encounter ahead of Lawrence of Arabia.
I did too, man. I mean, I had picked Raiders over Lawrence of Arabia just by a hair. So, Brief Encounter wins for me here. Here's the PSA for everybody. Go watch Brief Encounter.
It's so good.
Understand. Yeah.
It's so good. And you know what else is good? Heat, the number 12 seed, up against the number 5 seed, Terminator 2. This is a harder one. But I think ultimately T2 is the tighter film. There's never a moment where this movie doesn't feel like it's being propelled forward. And I think that, for me, is why Terminator 2 is the better film and why it's moving on.
Yeah, I think that Heat has the better scene. Like, that scene of them sitting at the coffee shop is incredible, and it's talked about for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, as a film, I think that T2 just freaking rocks, bro. Like, it's just nonstop awesome action when John Connor realizes that he can control the Terminator and has him turn on the two, biker guys who are trying to help him, which is comedic in its own right. I just love T2, man. So yeah, that's moving on for me.
All right, we're jumping over to the other side of the bracket. We've got the Grand Budapest Hotel versus Silence. I don't even think we need to discuss this one. I think Grand Budapest moves on here, Brad.
Yeah, Silence is fine. It's worth a first round victory, but Grand Budapest is going to do some damage in this bracket, Bob.
Then we have A Few Good Men up against The Bridge on the River Kwai, the dad movie deluxe pairing. This is really hard, dude. I think, surprisingly, I'm going to move A Few Good Men on. I think Bridge on the River Kwai is actually the better movie. But we talked a lot in that episode about the section in the middle where they leave the POW camp to follow William Holden's character for a little too long. And it really did slow the movie down for me. And I think A Few Good Men is the more compulsively rewatchable movie. And so I'm moving that one on.
I'm actually moving it on as well, Bob.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I love Bridge on the River Kwai. But it just doesn't move the way A Few Good Men does. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm moving it forward.
Okay, and that takes us to our last 4 movies. Taxi Driver versus Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I don't know, man. This was very easy for me. I moved Taxi Driver on in a heartbeat.
What's one of your favorite scenes from Taxi Driver?
I mean, like the famous mirror scene, like the you talking to me scene. I think pretty much every scene with Sybil Shepherd is actually really, really good. Like surprisingly so. Because I feel like that's not what people remember from this movie, but that's where the sense of dread and the unease and the like, oh, this man is like socially inept and this is going to lead to bad places. I think that's where the movie really succeeds for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally in with you, man. Honestly, I think that I had a De Niro assance this season, where I went from thinking that De Niro was this old man who was like a fine actor to kind of understanding why people are like, holy shit, it's Robert De Niro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Okay, and that takes us to our final matchup, Aliens versus Jaws. I think this is where we're going to stoke some division, Brad, because I moved Aliens on.
What?
Yeah.
Bob.
Jaws is a great movie. Jaws is not a perfect movie, despite what some people say. And I think that Aliens is closer to being a movie with zero fat on it than Jaws is. And so I moved Aliens on.
Yeah, I just think you're wrong there, man. I think that Aliens has enough chinks in its armor. It's a little bit ragged in the way it presents itself, which is fine. Like, it's the 80s. They're trying to figure out what this new world of technology is bringing them. Whereas in the, when they were making Jaws, they weren't bogged down by that. And I think that Jaws is easily the better pick here.
Well, that means that we have to flip a coin, man. And so if we're going geographically, as you say, Aliens comes first. Aliens will be heads. Jaws will be tails for a spot in our round of 8. Brad?
Bob, this is the first one that I feel like actually has some weight behind it.
I know. Yeah, I think you might actually be mad at me if Aliens wins this one.
I would be.
Well, let's see. Brad, flip that coin.
Robert, Jaws is a movie that I love, and I am so thankful that we had it in this season, and I'm disappointed to say that it is going into the fiery inferno.
Oh, man. So
Aliens is moving into the round of 8.
All right, so that finalizes it. We've got Jurassic Park, Shaun of the Dead, Brief Encounter, Terminator 2, The Grand Budapest Hotel, A Few Good Men, Taxi Driver, and Aliens. 2 Jim Camerons, only 1 Spielberg, Brad. Are you surprised?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I did not have 2 Jim Camerons in mind. I had 2 Spielbergs, but somebody literally just ruined that. I am a little bit surprised here. Let's see. We have. Give me a half sec.
You know, I gotta say, as you're looking up whatever you're looking up, these all seem like bro-y movies on the surface, but then I think about each of these movies, and this is probably the most tonally varied round of 8 that I can remember us having.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Jurassic Park, Shaun of the Dead, like sure, I get that. You know, like those are dorm room movies.
Yeah.
But then Brief Encounter matched up against T2 and then Grand Budapest thrown in there. Like I'm really, really satisfied with this group of films.
Yeah. I mean, I will say we have the number 1, 8, 4, 5, 2, 10, 3, and 11.
Mm-hmm. So there were a couple big upsets here.
Yeah, there were some upsets. We have some films from, the double digits entering the round of 8. So this has been a good bracket so far, man.
All right, it remains to be seen what is going to be crowned the champion of Season 6. Join us next time as we finish off this bracket. We'll look at the round of 8, narrowing it all the way down to the Season 6 champion, and we'll drink 3 bourbons from Doc Swinson's. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.